We'll start first by acknowledgement with every respect to the Lepongan-speaking people on whose traditional territory this university stands on, and the Songis, the Esquimals, and the Spanish people whose historical relationships with the land still continues to this day. We want to say welcome to everyone, the Nigerian Working Group of the Canadian Coalition of the Global Health Research for the Global Health Research. We shall start first with singing the national anthem of Nigeria. Please do join us as we pledge to our dear fatherland, Nigeria. You have some flyers beside you, that is the lyrics for the Nigerian anthem. When we're singing the national anthem, we stand. Thank you. Nigerians among us, please, can we hear your voice? Arise, O compatriots, Nigeria's call obey, to serve our fatherland with love and strength and faith. The labor of our heroes first shall never be in vain. To serve with heart and might, one nation bound in freedom, peace and unity. And it follows with the pledge. Nigeria, my country, to be faithful, loyal, and honest. Nigeria, with all my strength, to defend her unity and uphold her honor and glory. So help me God. Thank you very much. That was the national anthem of Nigeria and our pledge. My name is Dr. Ngozi Joy Kechebelu, a doctoral student in the Social Dimensions of Health program of the Faculty of Human and Social Development here in UVic. I am a member of the Nigerian Working Group of the Canadian Coalition for Global Health Research. And by way of introduction, the CCGHR is a knowledge network with global health equity for over 500 members from 49 countries, with 20 Canadian universities and still counting, and about 10 chapters, student chapters. We urge you that at the end of this program, you can join us. Go to our website on ccghr.ca to learn more about us. And do not forget to click on being a member registration. Before we start this event, I want to tell us that we have the washroom on that side. And we shall be taking pictures and doing video recording in case you want your privacy. You do not want to appear in the video or in the pictures. Our photographer is by this side, Charon, and you can always tell her and she will respect that privacy. We are going to be conscious of time in this event. It's going to last for about 2 hours and some fraction of minutes. And I want to start with introduction of other members of the Nigerian Working Group. I start first with Shino on my right. Shino, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Adeshina Alane. I'm a grad student, master's at the Department of Computer Science, and my research is in health informatics.
Okay, the other person that is going to be here is still coming. Two others are unavoidably absent. One of them, the wife has a baby, a young baby, less than 2 months old. He was here early by name Taiwo. And Taiwo is a PhD student in Center for Global Studies, yeah. And the other one is a master's student with telecommunications. Her name is Chinonye. She had to go for something very important outside Victoria. Now, the next thing, our topic is the Forum on Climate Change in Africa, and we're going to be watching a documentary video, and this kind of gives you a highlight of what is happening in Nigeria, and it's also happening in other parts of Africa. So we're using Nigeria as a focus of what is happening in African continent. Shino, can we have the documentary, please? One thing about Nigeria Working Group is that most of us, the 5 of us for now, are from different states that is being affected. I'm from the southeast Anambra state, and one thing that is peculiar about these climate realities is too much of the building, too much of the logging. It's obvious that the number of hotels and gigantic buildings and houses in Anambra State and Imo State, when you add all of them together, is more than the number of hotels you have in Lagos as a mega city, or even in Abuja, that is the capital of Nigeria. And all these are affecting, bringing about climate change in Nigeria. Now, we will go to the discussion. It's my pleasure, and do join me to welcome our advisor, Vic Newfield, a retired physician from University of McMaster, but he's not yet tired. He is an educator of more than 25 years, a mentor par excellence, and he was a founding coordinator for Canadian Coalition for Global Health Research, and presently a director now, still in that CCGHR. Please welcome Vic Newfield as he invites the speakers that will deliberate and reflect on climate change in Africa. Please come with you.
It's my pleasure to introduce you to 2 colleagues who are going to help us think about what we've just seen and give their own perspectives on it, and in particular stimulate us with some questions that we can all think about together and talk about together. Sophia Cardenuto is from the Department of Geography. She just arrived here a few months back, I can't remember when, July, something like that. So we're very pleased to welcome her here. Her particular interest is in forestry governance. Lived in Cameroon for some time. Has been to quite a number of countries, including my favorite country, Zambia. So we had some Zambia talks about that. I'll just do brief introductions and you guys can say more about how you connect with all of this. Moussa Magassa, many of you would know. He is the Human Rights Director here at UVic. Teaches in a social justice program. Has appointments at Royal Roads and at UBC about related things. I noticed at the bottom of his blurb that since 2001 he calls Canada his home. So he's from Senegal originally. So I've asked our colleagues to just reflect on what they've seen, and then take as much time as they'd like, but then give us some questions to think about, and let's just see where the discussion might go. Sophia, you want to start us off, and away you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Vic. So welcome, everyone. It's great to see so many diverse faces. So I want my commentary to be more of an introduction to a broader discussion with you as an audience who is also quite knowledgeable about different things. So hopefully we can move on to that quite quickly. So I want to make a few points, mainly that the solutions are known. We have solutions to these problems. Implementation is a challenge. I'm going to talk a little bit about an example that I'm more familiar with, but I want to end by just asking, what do you think? And mainly what is holding back the scaling up or rolling out of these solutions that we already have. So in terms of what we know works, the documentary did a good job of showing at the end a few ways of addressing this climate change issue. There's a lot of existing improved agriculture techniques that are able to deal with some of the issues of erosion or soil degradation that is happening across Nigeria and other places. So we've seen that there's been ways, I'm familiar with some situations in Ethiopia where they've been actually able to revitalize, rehabilitate very degraded areas, even barren areas where the soil has to be regenerated. So there's certain tree species that are specific to those locations that are able to grow in those very harsh environments and actually help to regenerate some of the soil. So even though the situation looks very dire, there's different ways of addressing that. Another solution that maybe some of you are familiar with is this idea of REDD+. So there were some representatives in the commentary that from the Cross River State who were representing the UN REDD program. So REDD is called Reducing Emissions. It's an acronym for Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation. And I'm more familiar with that program in Cameroon, where there's been a lot of work, mostly analytical work, similar to Nigeria. In Cameroon, REDD+ hasn't been scaled out yet. But there's a lot of knowledge existing about what the issues are, what is causing deforestation, and what are the possible solutions. So there's a lot of work and ideas that have been piloted and are proven to work in terms of addressing fuel wood, either through demand or supply side solutions. There's a lot of work, like I was mentioning, with agriculture, improved agriculture techniques to have productivity increases on existing farmland and reduce expansion. There's also work going on in other countries related to planting trees in areas that are prone to desertification. There's a green belt movement where a lot of trees are being planted to address that issue. So yeah, to move on to the next point, it's really a matter of why is this not being implemented, and why is this not happening at the scale that it needs to happen at. And an interesting recent study that I just want to mention, because I think it has a lot of relevance to this case, is a study that looks at carbon pricing as an example of a climate mitigation strategy. And the study shows that the countries that have lower indices of corruption and higher trust in state institutions are able to not only have a price on carbon, but actually have a much higher price on carbon. So I think that is something that would be interesting to discuss in this context. What is the trust between Nigerians and their state institutions? And is there any, with this current level of trust, what can actually be done by the government in the name of saving the climate, saving the environment? Would the citizens of Nigeria actually, take that as a legitimate cause, or would there be too much distrust that these environmental programs wouldn't actually be feasible? So I think it would be interesting to talk a bit about those types of barriers in the discussion. And again, to bring it to an end, to summarize, I think it would be interesting for us to share a bit more broadly. What do you think are the main factors inhibiting the broad implementation of these known solutions? And one more final thing that I want to mention, because I think the commentary or the documentary is quite dire at times and quite disappointing at times, but there are some indicators, especially health indicators in Nigeria, that have actually been improving. So child mortality has gone down quite significantly in the last few decades. So hopefully, in most countries, when child mortality goes down, there tends to be less children. So the fertility rate also goes down in parallel. This hasn't happened yet in Nigeria, but hopefully these types of progress will lead to other outcomes in terms of improvements in education, improvements in women's health, which will eventually lead also to lower fertility rates and other ways of solving the problem. So yeah, just to say that there are some things that are getting better at the broad scale. So thank you so much.
Great, thanks. Moussa, please.
Well, thank you, Sophia. Yeah, I was looking at this video, and luckily I have my back to you all, because what I was seeing here is not new to me. I came from a small village in Senegal, in the north of Senegal, on the border with Mauritania. You hear about the Sahara Desert? The Sahel? I come from there. Oftentimes when people ask me where you come from, I say, I came from a place where no one is left. All young people at 14 years old, you have to start thinking going away, because there is nothing home. When you farm, there is no rain. When there is rain, there is no crops. I mean, it will rain 3 times in the year, and then it is over. So I know very well what is happening. And it left me with 2 things though. And those are the 2 key questions that was asked in the video. The first one was, what have we done to ourselves to get to this point? To see our land eroded, to see our home destroyed, to see our resources, instead of them empowering us and enriching us, that it become a curse. Because why curse? If you see a country like Nigeria with oil, but you see what you saw on this documentary, the poverty, the injustice, the structural violence, you wonder why. That's some of the question I'm left with. What have we done to ourselves? And that hurts, because I come from a culture where we say, you are a human being because of other human beings. We value people, we value ourselves as human beings. But something has gone wrong here. And I think in one of the commentators in the video, he said it, something has gone wrong. And my second question then is, why are we doing this to ourselves? Then now I'm not talking about us only as African. I'm talking about us as human beings. And that's crucial for me to bring it, to talk about human being, because I work as a human rights person, and this is what I have been doing all my life. I don't see myself as the only one to have the solution to this problem, because I do believe, and it was very clearly stated in the documentary, this is a global issue. It is an issue that calls on all of us. Not only the well-being of Africa and Nigeria, but the well-being of the whole world, because nowadays we all have heard about climate change. Even if you've not been to Africa, we know that it's not only in Africa, it is everywhere. And we all contributing to it, all of us. I know people don't believe me. Some people think, no, I'm not doing anything. Okay, we're going to demonstrate that. I want you to turn to the person next to you and prove me that what they're wearing, just their shirt, that it comes from Canada. If not, tell me where it comes from and how did you get it. Yeah, just turn to the person, show them. Here. Where my shirt come from?
China.
China. Can you do it? Are you afraid to do it? Just check. Okay, check it yourself. Check your shirt. Just check where it comes from. Okay, now I'm asking you, Vietnam.
Yeah.
So, tell me where your shirt come from.
Oh, this is from UK.
UK?
This is Africa.
Africa?
Nigeria.
It's called Sweden and it comes from China.
China. Where? Where it come?
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
China.
China. China.
China.
China. I want to tell more. But what I'm asking you, you don't know how many trees they have to cut to make this shirt. How many oil they have to spill to bring this shirt to you here. How many planes they have to fly. How much pollution they have to put in the air. You don't even think about it. That's why I say we are all part of this. So now that brings me to my last question. And it is not a question to myself, it is a question to all of us. And I think I start with what Sophia said. For example, in Nigeria, Sophia said, trust. How can we see the trust to be established between the government and the people so that there is a change, structural change? But also, what are the main factors that hinder solution to these climate issues? My question is how you, who also are part of all these things, and me as part of all these things from Africa, where I have been cutting all these trees in my village and now I can't even go there, up to here, what can we do? That's my question to all of you and to myself. What can we do? And how can we overcome those factors that are hindering development and sustainability? So, we are waiting for you. Tell us.
Thank you both, please. Yep.
Well, I guess I asked, how do we hold our governments to account? I mean, you point to the situation in Nigeria, we start from that, and I think we know too that corruption is endemic. And what is the government doing there? I'm asking a lot of questions, I guess it is. But I guess it does come basically down to how do we hold our governments to account and get them to change the approach. I mean, if anything, it seems to me we're increasing, perhaps a few years ago, we're going in the right direction. Increasingly, we seem to be going in the wrong direction. We were making efforts a few years ago. It seems to me our governments in many cases aren't making those efforts.
That's a big question, and I'm going to break it into two. So, how are we going to make our government with S at the end accountable? We want to hear.
Well, for Nigeria, it's a difficult one. It's kind of a vicious cycle where the electoral link, I mean, democracy as government of the people electing leaders and voting the leaders to be accountable, that link is broken or weakened, so that's the crucial part. As long as people can come into government without real elections, right? As long as people can come into government by manipulating the citizens, right? Maybe offering money, bribes during elections and people selling their votes, then this cycle is going to be on and on for a long time. And then when they get into power, they don't prioritize some of the things we're talking about. So in Nigeria, climate change policy is zero, right? And so there were times back then when in the north, there were periodic planting of trees, you know, to stop deforestation, right? But all those ones, they've stopped now. And so I don't see the solutions. Maybe I'm personal with that. As somebody who has lived, as somebody who has been following the governance cycle. I mean, it's people. Elections are on now. Leaders get into power, and that's it, right? And so, unless that governance challenge is kind of repaired, then we're still going to have problems for a long time.
Okay. So one answer is the governance. There is a challenge there and it has to change. Elizabeth?
I was just listening to your commentary about the Nigerian challenges and thinking we could just substitute U.S. government for all the commentary we're offering, or more recently Ontario government backing away from climate commitments. But in the U.S., where that's happened in such a distressing way, the city governments have taken up the reins, right? So the questions of local governance and the ability of local actors in coalitions to kind of move around inert or counterproductive federal governments is something to bear in mind. So local action by small NGOs, by local coalitions or cooperatives of farmers and so on. I think we have to turn, at least in part, to those when we face governments like, the Trump administration, or now the Ontario government that wants to back away from carbon pricing and carbon taxes and so on. We have to look locally, at least in part. It's not to be Pollyanna that the solutions can lie there alone and that we can ignore the structures, not at all. But I think we have to take action locally as well.
Josie, you had a comment?
Yes, maybe you're looking at it because I still don't think there's any way we can compare Nigeria and maybe Canada or the US, because you see that more than 70% of the Nigerian population is living below $1 a day. And
I was only comparing the governments.
okay, the government, okay.
Yeah.
Because when you look at when there was this ratification by Nigeria signing the NDG goals, Nigeria was part of it in 2014. But what happened? Sometime last year, they also became part of Million 10 goals, and they brought up some non-eco-friendly plans or policies. Something like an example is the Anchor Borrowers Initiative, whereby governments were giving people fertilizers and stuff like that, herbicides, and all this contributes to carbon emission. And because of what happened in Nigeria during this presidential or during this democratic rule, the dollar was, when dollar pricing to the naira was so bad, and it affected the oil pricing again, and Nigeria started gas flaring again. And part of the ratification was that by 2030, that there will be no gas flaring in Nigeria, but it had to go back again. Going back to coal projects. Nigeria going back to coal projects, we all know about coal. So we begin to wonder, and you were talking about, Sophia was talking about trust, and it makes you wonder, when we watch this film as a group, the Nigerian Working Group, that was when most of us could relate the security issues from cattle rearing in Nigeria. Majority of the people, I was in Nigeria in August, and there was this research that I was kind of involved in. And when you're asking the youth, the young people about climate realities, they didn't know anything about it. They didn't even know that common throwing away of waste on the road And this is a state that is affected by so much flooding. So what can we do about this? Because this is something obvious that is happening. Somebody said, not that I liked it, but that comment, if you know about Nigeria, one of the commentators said something that everybody will converge to the middle belt. That is the middle part of the country, because it's affecting the northern part, it's affecting the southern part. Thank you.
Comment here, and then we'll come back to our panel.
Yeah. Just wanted to pick up on what Moussa said, or what he challenged, or the reframing of where our clothes coming from, because I think we're often quick to look for accountability of our governments, but we as individuals are accountable too. So if you take Elizabeth's comment of bringing it down in scale to a global level, we are also accountable as global consumers, and I think there's a certain level of comfort here in Canada that kind of breeds an apathy because life is easy here. And so when Gopi says, 70% of the people in Nigeria are living below the poverty line, this issue affects people, so differently, and the most vulnerable are the poorest in the poorest regions. And so I think in terms of what can we do in holding our governments accountable, I think we first have to start with ourselves and think about what is our place in these global supply chains that perpetuate things like climate change, but also things like injustice and poverty and global inequality.
Just to jump in, could you folks introduce yourselves? Some of us don't know who you are. Elizabeth, please.
I'm Elizabeth Fibert from the History Department, and I work on sustainable agriculture and so on in Southern Africa.
I'm Nicole Waite-Seymour. I work at the Center for Global Studies, but I'm also doing my PhD on climate change and migration with political science.
Thank you. Good. Reactions to some of this?
Yeah, I think I'm very glad with how the discussion is going, because I also thought that some interesting questions arising out of this that I had thought would be interesting discussion points would be the role of civil society. And we saw a lot of advocates in this film, especially around the oil spills, and trying to argue against that. So I think in the context where, as a citizen, your vote is not necessarily having the impact that you want it to, like you were saying, what is the role of civil society as a non-state actor? And I see that this is already existing in Nigeria, and I'm not as familiar with the local context. I don't know how vibrant it actually is, but it seems like there's quite a lot of activity there. So what is the challenge there? Why is civil society not able to demand these changes or this accountability when elections aren't doing the trick? So I think that would be maybe something that, well, anyone can talk about, but I would be especially interested in the case of Nigeria, why civil society is still, it seems to be vibrant, but it's not having the impact in terms of change that we'd like to see.
Do you have something to say? Do you want to say something?
Yeah, in that regard,
Can you stand up, Jenny? Sorry,
my name is Kachi. I'm doing my master's in electrical engineering. I'm from Nigeria.
Also NWG.
Yeah, I'm also a part of the group. All the systems you guys talked about, like the civil society, all those things, we have them in place in Nigeria. But because the kind of government we operate, is like, we see it as democracy, but in the real sense, it's not democracy, it's dictatorship. Because the governments, they amass powers to themselves. They don't, for me, they go there maybe to enrich their pockets. They don't care about citizens. But they know all these things. They know the impact of their actions. But because they don't have the mind of the people at heart, so, it's very, very difficult for maybe the common man in the street to, have an impact they can't listen to you.
Mhm.
So that's easy. Our leaders are so corrupt.
Mhm.
So until they understand that everything we do comes around to the people, I think we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, well, my name is Sherry. I'm taking neurobiology undergrad right now. So just relating to what he said, because I hate everyone talking about government. Well, first of all, I go to try to connect nature and the principles of and connect the principles that we all live on. Because when you talk about the government, yeah, I know the Nigerian government is corrupt. That's fine. But we as individuals, we have a part to play. We have a role to play. Okay, let me use the Canadian Medical School as an example. When I was checking the statistics of entrance rate, I realized that if your name permanent resident, because I want to go to medical school, if your name permanent resident, you can't even get it. So I want us to look into the education aspect. In Nigeria, most of the politicians there and the wealthy guys, they send their kids abroad, and their kids go there, study good professionals, and then they don't go to utilize these professionals. So how do you think your country will be good? How you can be good? So it doesn't just rely on the political aspect, it's also on individual and education aspect. Because if I'm a trained personnel in my field of studies, and I have to go into it to invest, get good business, do things, I will help the economy. And by the way, I will help the education, and it's also educate other people on climate conditions and other conditions. But if you keep relying on government, that whole government issue, it can't work. That's not how everything works. Because in every advantage, there's a disadvantage of something. So I believe that most of the government, like Nigerian government, we should also work on our educational aspect. Back 10, 20 years ago, my dad was telling me that most white guys most foreigners come down to Nigeria to study. But right now, the educational system is so bad. I couldn't even study in my country. To get even an admission is a problem. The bright students, when we get into admission, people I know can change the country. They frustrate the students. These students have to involve themselves in problems that will lead to issues, like for example, the 419 business and everything. And these are smart kids that if they impose this education on the theoretical aspect of life and practical aspect of life, it's going to change the world. I envy the Canadian government a lot. I envy the school a lot. They do perfectly well. They do well. And students remain here and make the government and make the economy get better. Even the US, same thing. So I believe that we should work on the educational system. If the political aspect is not working, they should invest more in the educational system at creating programs that will educate students and educate individuals. When you go outside the country and you do something good, invest in your hometown. If that's where you live, that is your homeland. That's one of the vital things that we need to deal with. Invest in our homeland and see how the changes is going to be to the next level. Not just the politicians. They are stealing the money, they are doing that's fine. But we individuals we have to have that extra, that thinking, that when we are done, we have to go and invest, and no one will stop us. If you look at most of the wealthy men right now, like Dangote, most of them don't reside back home, their kids are not there. Most of them are in the UK, having good businesses in the UK, having good businesses in Scotland, all these big places. Trying to invest here, you see a lot of people spend millions of Canadian dollars just to buy a house here. If you use millions of Canadian dollars and convert it to Naira to create an infrastructure down in Nigeria that deals with climate change, educating students, it will go so far. So I believe that's one of the issues, the education and individual person, not just the government. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so wisdom from the back. Yes, over here.
Okay, so I think we need to break this down. Yes, from the discussion, the people, the matter, right? Practices that are not sustainable, throwing garbage everywhere and stuff like that. But government is also central here. If you look at the oil industry, gas flaring, oil spills, all the things you mentioned here. I mean, who is going to enforce them? The government, right? So that has not happened. And so what is priority to government is key. Citizens can do a lot. And then talking about NGOs, so there are two kinds of NGOs. So many of the NGOs you see here, these are NGOs with donor funding.
Yeah.
right? And so these are, they are not widespread, and so they are different from NGOs that could spring up organically from the grassroots. So these ones are not really there, and so this is where the challenge is, building that critical mass at the bottom, right, where people can challenge the government. So these guys, they have access to funding, and they can say a lot, and it will come out here, right? What of the lookout? So this is where the challenge is, and that's where the disjunction is. How these kind of donor-funded NGOs can connect with the lookout pool and their own organizations. And then again, what is even the awareness about climate change? That's the question. Are people really aware that this is a risk? Right? That some of these practices can actually get them entangled and get them messed up because of deforestation or flooding. So I think, he talked about education. Education is key. But again, the mass education and the orientation, government also has a lot to do about that. So there are linkages. Government is at the center. Policies, and not just policies, how well are they enforced? Right? So the government has been shifting, to start with, the penalty for gas flaring is so little, and so the companies prefer to flout the law because it's beneficial to them, right? And again, government doesn't even enforce it. This is the point. And so when there was huge oil spill in Ogoniland, it was shown here, nothing was done until UNDP came to carry out a survey, and they brought out the magnitude, well publicized. And so it was then that government started coming. At the federal level, government is trying to clean up that place, even though it's going to take a lot of time for that to be done. But again, there's a disjunction between government at the federal level, government at the state level, right? Which is the closest, because local governments are basically non-existent, right? So these are the challenges: how to connect these multiple spheres and connect them to the individual citizen as citizens.
So let's keep track of some of these themes that are coming up, various levels of government. I think Elizabeth's point some time ago. The importance of just general education about climate change in our schools, our universities, and so on. Your point, I think, and goes even a lot could be done there. I'm just going to make one comment about the Nigerian government. I was impressed by several people in the film that are government officials, right? They're providing leadership in their own departments, in their own states, in some way, right? So it seems to me that it's not all total bad news. There's some remarkable people here and there that are doing important things, and which is nice for me to see them, government people, not NGO people, say some of the things they did. So there is some leadership there that can be built upon. So just a comment.
There was a hand.
I'm sorry, yes, please.
I was going to say something about the rule of law, all of the things you mentioned today. First, someone made mention of why civil societies are that powerful and how they can get noticeable change in society. And I'll say that it just shows that there's an absence of the rule of law. Because in societies where there is adequate respect for the rule of law, you understand the place of civil society in shaping government policy. But back home, that's not the case, because first you have pockets and pockets of civil society groups, some of them whose intentions are not genuine. For those someone mentioned, I'd like to say that that also boils down to the problem of the rule of law and the lack of respect for the rule of law. The government had some incentives in place for local utilization of the gas that was being flared. It was supposed to be passed on to the electrical generating companies, so they would use the gas to fire the thermal plants and then generate more electricity. But it comes to play that the government is actually owing those companies. Okay, the government tells you, don't flare this gas, sell this gas to electricity generating companies so that you can generate more electricity. And it happens that the government still holds some power. I mean, the electricity industry is liberalized and it's been unbundled to generation, transmission, and distribution. And the government still has shares across board. So the government still ends up being the biggest debtor to these generating companies. So does it make sense to tell me not to flare gas, that you buy it from me but you wouldn't pay me? It's unethical. Nobody's going to listen to you. And that also shows that there's an absence of rule of law. And someone also mentioned that we're pushing everything to the government. Yes, we are pushing everything to the government because we vote to put you in place. And the government doesn't do pretty much everything. But there are two things that every sensible government should do that creates a platform for every other thing to work naturally. Security. If there's security, I would bring my money home. I wouldn't buy a house here. I'll take it home. And if I'm not sure that there's security of life and property, no security of investment, it's not a sensible decision for me to leave a safer place and take my money, hard-earned money, to an unsafe place. So pretty much security and rule of law, I think if those things are in place, then we can make more progress.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Ahmed. And the biggest thing that I want to know about is what's China's role in this, and like when it comes to African investment in terms of infrastructure and pretty much clean energy. Like China is the biggest investment in Africa, not because of moral reasons, it's because of economic reasons. There's the One Belt and One Road initiative, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been building roads and infrastructure, inland infrastructure, which directly, so that trade can divert to China, pretty much. So I want to know what are the, I know the pros to it, but what are the cons? What are you guys giving up? Because like I'm pretty sure they just built like a road in Senegal and Mauritius, from where you're from, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I just want to know like what's the cons and like what are you guys afraid of, pretty much, as of China? I guess there's not being able to pay off the debt. But
yeah. Okay. If I have to answer you as a Senegalese, as someone who was born in Senegal,
yes,
that's a great question. But I am aware, and I try for the last few years, China has been involved in Africa. Mm-hmm. I try to understand very well the books that talk about China, what is in for them. Because for me, what happened to my village and to my country started in the 16 or 1700, not now. So I'm very wary and very careful with some of the news would try now to point to China as the new enemy of Africa, when everything already in my house was right before China came in. However, I will also take into account what China can do wrong to Africa, but also what China is bringing to Africa. But I really want to be careful that before we focus on China, let's finish the conversation about what is happening. Senegal, 99% of the problems in Senegal, China doesn't have anything to do with it. Nothing. It is France. It is the Western world. And I think this is what we need to talk until we finish that conversation. Because the colonization is not over. It is still going on. Just lately, 2 months ago, in Senegal, there is a controversy that the palace, the president palace, that the country has been paying rent to France since independence. rent our own presidential palace is owned by French, and we're paying rent every month to the French. So for me, the conversation about China, let's have it tomorrow. But my real problem is not China. It is the European countries. It is those who have invented trade, those who have invented differential structure of trade, and that situation is still here. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in for a moment. As a timekeeping comment, we need to be out of here at 6 or just after. We need to give our chairperson a few minutes just before we dismiss. And I think I'll ask our two colleagues for any kind of summary comments that you might have about this very lively discussion. And then we'll bring things to a close. Sophia, can we come back to you for any wrap-up thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I guess it's difficult to wrap up. It seems like we were kind of just getting into the meat of the discussion, but I think it's empowering to see that there's so much passion about this, and that there's especially youth that are engaged and interested in discussing these issues. That was something that came up towards the end of the documentary, is having a real discussion is the first step. And so it's encouraging to see the educated, you all here in Canada, and knowing about these issues and discussing these issues, and you will continue that discussion in your circles. And I think it's great to see that maybe there's a seed of those deep discussions that need to happen in order to bring about change.
Great.
Yeah, for me, I just want to say thank you. Earlier when I was talking to my friend Mark, and I say, I'm just thankful to have all of you in my world, because that's why it is a good world for me. What I want to just stretch here is that when you talk about education, I think it is very important that it's not only about the government education, it is also ourselves. And this is what someone like Freire will call conscientization, meaning awareness about what is happening in Africa. So maybe we all can be part of that. It is to go back and help people to know and understand what is going on around us. Because as Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change your world, which means it's not the government to change that world. It is you to get that education and go back and change your own world. And we know that change is possible because it starts with ourselves. But I hear you as someone born in Senegal. When I think about the government, I'm like you in Nigeria. You know, it's very difficult to believe in our government and to believe what they're doing. Civil society was a good point, Sophia, you brought up. In Africa, it is difficult. I remember in Uganda, someone talking to me about suitcase civil society. So it is difficult to talk about civil society because sometimes they are in the same basket with the government. And those who are not, they have trouble to survive. But still, no one will change this situation for us in Africa except ourselves. We just have to find different ways to strategize around it. And finally, I want to say, we still have a lot of allies and friends all over the world. And we need to draw on some of those real friends who can help us. But they should not do the work for us. That's my point. They should come with you at home, but they should not cook for you. You should cook and then show them how you cook it. So that means the change in Africa will be only, and it will only happen if we stand up ourselves. And I have hope. I really have hope. Thank you.
A comment from me and then over to Ngozi. So the group that organized this event is called the Nigeria Working Group. It's a grand title we gave ourselves in the spring. And I've been very impressed by the leadership that's here among Nigerian colleagues studying at this university, and the fact that they're now some kind of a group. I think some of you that have not been members of it so far, Ngozi will track you down and put you on the list. But I see some quite remarkable potential of this group, maybe not necessarily around climate change, but also some of these other issues. So as a guy with lots of white hair on top, I'm quite encouraged about the way the group's working and look forward to it some more. So.
Thank you. Can we just clap for our panelists for the good work they did? Everything is coming to an end, and just like somebody said, climate reality is a collective endeavor. It's something every of us must put our hands and see how we are going to handle this, because it's now with us. It's not just something far off. Barack Obama said that it used to be, people thought that it was something far off, but it's everywhere. It's happening to us. Wherever you find yourself, there are climate realities. Nigeria Working Group of Canadian Coalition for Global Health Research wants to thank everybody that made this a success. We never knew it would get to this point when we were all sitting down together with Nathan Lachowski, my supervisor, a wonderful mentor too, and also part of the team. And we're all thinking, what are we going to do? Till one day, Nick said, can we come together? Can you get other Nigerians together? And the other Nigerians in UV got together, and this is it. Thank you very much. It's really a teamwork, and everybody contributed. And just like I said earlier, please go to ccghr.ca and join us and be a member. Just register and be a member. Nigeria Working Group is part of British Columbia Coalition Institute. They give us a base still under CCGHR. And to God who made this a reality. Thank you all for coming. Yeah.